right, here we are at week 12. This is the last week we have together in this home study course. We've been through 11 weeks together, and now you know all of the signals, or at least you've been afforded all the signals. And once we get to this point, now everything else is psychological. If you read a lot about trading and investing, what you will often find is that people will say, well, success is at least 90% mental. And that's what we're going to concentrate on this week. Success is mental, and how your mental attitude and how your total attitude determines whether or not you're going to be a success in the market or not. Now, again, once you have all the signals down and you understand how to implement those signals, put them on the trading partner, everything is psychological. And when we talk about psychology, there's two things we want to cover today, and our goal is to cover the difference between working and playing and how to get in the zone. Recently, during an NBA playoff, Michael Jordan scored 55 points in one game. A radio announcer, a TV announcer, after the game stuck a microphone into his face and said, "Michael, what happened?" And Michael's response was, "Well, I just got in the zone and I couldn't get out." And that's what we want to do with the market. We want to get into the zone and not be able to get out, because once we're in the zone, then we're going to trade our most profitable. There are two elements to trading. One is science and one is art. And the art is designed and comes from being centered on process. The science is content. And we've already gone through grounded assessments and ungrounded assessments. You know all of the grounded assessments, and you know all the ungrounded assessments, such as the Elliott wave and so forth. What we want to do is get in the zone and understand the difference between working and playing. Now, to become a master trader, you must get in the zone. And let's look over here at the monitor, and let's look at the 5 levels of trading. We've gone over this before, but we want to review it once again. Notice we put it in a pyramid form because there are a lot fewer people at the top than there are at the bottom. And as you remember, the novice level, the bottom level, our goal here is to trade the market, gain experience without losing money. Once that's over, then we want to end the trance, and we'll be talking about trance-ending experiences all this week. If you're at the novice level, you're in a trance. Your limitations are either knowledge or attitude, but both of those have to be changed before you can go up and lose the novice level and start the advanced beginner level. At the advanced beginner level, which is our second step, our goal here is to make money on a one-contract basis. If you're not making money consistently on a one-contract basis, then you simply aren't at the beginner level, or at the advanced beginner level. The next level up is the competent level. Now, this is where science ends. At the competent level, you know all of the signals, you know all of the permutations of the market, and you know how to implement the signals. You know how to get in, you know how to fill out the trading partner, you know how to put orders in, and you know how to get out. Once you leave this, then the number of people who are at the next level is much, much smaller. We call this level the virtuoso level. This is where you start putting your own feelings and you get a feel of the market itself. This is at the level where you know without knowing how you know, and trading starts to become an effortless effort. You're no longer disappointed with the market, you're totally in tune with the market. And then there's one more level, and this is the pinnacle. This is the master level. This is where you are so good and you understand the market so well and you're in tune with the market so well that you yourself become inventive. You become a leader. You start seeing things in the market that no one else has seen. Now, the key to this moving up, as we've stated before, is letting go of your trances. So each one of these is a trance-ending experience. And when you get up to the second and the master level and the virtuoso level, those levels, you're clearly in the zone. Now, the next question is, how do you stay in the zone? Staying in the zone can be put into perspective in a number of discrete ways. And over the past 20 years, a great deal of effort and research has gone into understanding what this zone is. For example, when the runner Jim Ryan broke the 4-minute mile, he said it was the easiest race I ever ran in my life. Let's look at some of the characteristics of staying in the zone. One, it's characterized by self-trust. That means that you don't have to go out, you don't have to check with anyone, you don't have to check with your guru, you don't have to check with books or newsletters or anyone's recommendation. You know what you want to do, you're in tune with the market, and you have great self-trust. If you don't have self-trust, you simply are not and cannot be in the zone. The next characteristic is its engrossing enjoyment. There's nothing you would rather be doing than be doing what you're doing right now. So you have self-trust, you're having a ball, and also you are focused, relaxed. You have focused relaxation, which means that you're not tense, you're performing well, and you're in the zone. You're in the present, you're in the process, you're in the art of trading. Now, the difference between working and playing, and let's spend a little bit of time on this because it really is how you handle chaos. And when you're working, some of the words we use are very interesting. If you go to Webster's Dictionary and look up the definition for work, you see toil and trouble and unhappiness. If you look for playing, you see something different. Now, it's very interesting in our society that the people who make the most money are individual sports stars primarily. Michael Jordan gets paid an enormous amount of money for playing. Whereas if you're working, even if you're the president of General Motors, you're not paid actually for your performance. You're paid for the performance of the hundreds of thousands of people who work for you. So there's a big difference. In playing, you get paid on what you do. In working, you get paid not just for what you do, but it's also dependent upon what other people do. So you're not in total control, whether you're in the zone or not. Another characteristic of the difference between playing and working is that if you work, you go to work to work. If you're playing, you go out to the playing field or you go out to the game. And we'll look at this even closer. But right now, let's look at 4 conditions which allow us to be in the zone. We're going to repeat some of these. Enjoyment. You're having a blast. Another condition that we've already talked about is your focused relaxation. You have a keen awareness and alertness. Everything is on go, but you're not trying. You're relaxed. You're free from extreme anxiety. In trading, you're not worried about the loss. You have that covered. And finally, there's the self-trust. This is the same thing we said before, but we think it's important enough to say it again. You have confidence in your ability. You know that you can do what your job is, and your job is to have fun at playing. Now, let's go back and look at the difference between work and play. In work, there's drudgery. There's also toil. And it's boring for most of us, or at least it gets boring pretty quickly. It's difficult. It's not easy. It's not play. It's stressful. It's content-oriented. In play, on the other hand, it's not drudgery, but it's fun. It's not toil. It's playful. It's not boring. It's interesting. It's not difficult. It's easy. Even though we're giving the best performance of our life, there's not a correlation between good performance and trying hard. In trading, when you try hard, you usually torpedo yourself and you don't do well. The biggest trades you will ever make are going to be surprises to you, and they're going to be exceptionally easy. It's not stressful. It's relaxing. After a day of trading in the zone, you don't feel like you have to go to bed or take a nap or take an aspirin or take a drink. Everything, the day has been relaxing. And finally, and this is extremely important, you're process-oriented rather than content-oriented. Now, what does this all boil down to? It boils down to something that you've seen before, and you're going to see it again because we think it's extremely important. In fact, we think this is probably the most important thing you could possibly learn in life and in this course. And that is that chaos really means new information. And you know what's coming up. The most important question we can ever ask is, again, how do you handle new incoming information? Your choices are to massage or distort it to fit into old categories, which either creates a feeling of overwhelm or boredom. Or your second choice is to let the new information, the chaos, organize itself, which means letting go, which means creating risk, which also means that we enjoy taking the risk. That's the fun of it. What if life had no risk at all? What if every trade you made was a winner? After a while, you would get bored. If you want to be a tennis player, for example, and if you always want to win, if you want a 100% record of winning in tennis play, then that's easy to do. All you do is you never play anyone who is anywhere close to you, have the skill that you have. You always play someone who is less challenging. And what happens is you become bored. The next one is, you've also seen, is that processing new information depends upon something. It depends upon letting go rather than trying hard. Remember our old illustration of there are billions and trillions of hydrogen atoms that are floating around this room right now, and every time you breathe in, you're breathing in millions of them. And there's also millions, billions, and trillions of oxygen atoms. And they come into each other's gravitational pull, and when that happens, that's new information. So back to this most important slide, which is how do you handle new information? And there's only two ways to do it, and let's talk about each way. One way is you come from old categories, and when you come from old categories, you're in jail. You cannot react except as you've reacted in the past. And what that means literally is that you are dead. And in the market, you are dead if you react from old categories. And traditional technical analysis, their primary basic fallacy is their assumption that the future will be like the past. Now, if you're processing new information and you're letting it organize itself, you're not in the past and you're not in the future. You're in the present. And being in the present is extremely hard to do. And we're going to look at that in detail the rest of this week. How do you get in the present? How do you stay in the present? And the gravitational pull, again, the most important question we can ask is, what do you do with this new information? Do you, A, fit it into old categories, or do you, B, let it organize itself? And there have been a number of books recently written from psychologists about how to get in the zone and how to stay in the zone. One of the interesting professions that they have studied, for example, is neurosurgeons, because one of the characteristics of neurosurgeons is that when they take a vacation, they usually go to some other country, some third world country, and do neurosurgery. They enjoy doing what they do so much that a vacation is simply doing it in a different place. In the market, that means that if you're not enjoying the trading, you're doing something wrong. And back to this slide here, how the hydrogen and how the oxygen atoms combine to create a much more complicated, a much more viable, and a much more free organization, which is the water molecule, is by giving up their old categories. So if we give up our old categories, that puts us in the present. Otherwise, we're operating in the past or in the future. And we don't want to do that. We want to create staying in the present. There's a very interesting book or concept of energy medicine that's just coming on, becoming popular now. And one of the people who have written that about this and done research in it is a lady by the name of Carolyn Myss. And in all of her research, she says that living well comes down to two things. Being healthy comes down to two things. Number one is forgiveness. And she makes a real important point of this, that the most important thing you can do is to forgive yourself. And the second thing is to live in the present tense. So what you have to do here, both the oxygen and the hydrogen have to forgive themselves for being hydrogen and oxygen atoms. And they have to live in the present. They have to let this new information organize itself. So reviewing, what Carolyn Myss says is that the two most important things is forgiveness, and the most important part of forgiveness is to forgive yourself of everything. Forgive yourself of the losses you made today or yesterday. Don't dwell on them. What happens with most traders get together is we gossip. We tell you about our best trade, and if somebody gets into a losing trade, we say, oh, that's nothing. You should have been there the day that I lost all that money. And we keep those with us. And that's operating from the past. And what it does is it condemns us to replay the past over and over and over. And again, if your life as a trader is nothing but trading the past, then as a trader, you're dead. Let me give you a couple of examples. It's very, very difficult to stay in the present moment. For example, right now, right this instant, are you thinking about what we're saying, what we're talking about? Are you thinking about how you're going to apply it? If you look in the automobiles, most drivers don't enjoy driving because they're already in the future. Tomorrow we'll spend some time about how we are like a video recorder, where one reel is the past, one is the future, and very few of us are on that recording head itself. Let me give you an example right now. Think about spending today, and this is one of the examples we request that you really do. Think about spending about 2 or 3 hours where you only use the present tense. You can't say anything about what I did yesterday or what I plan to do in 5 minutes or when will lunch be ready or dinner will be ready or whatever. You've got to stay exactly in the present tense. Suggest that you practice that and put that on your morning pages and also record it in your diary. Record the reaction that you get from yourself. And once you do this several days, try to stay longer and longer and longer in the present tense. It's an almost impossible thing to do in the beginning. Then, the next step, and this is one that's really tough, is try to think only in the present tense. Because most of our thinking is done in the past and done in the future. What the past did to us and what we're going to do to the past in the future. So that's about it. That's plenty enough for the first day on our final week. And this week, we're going to spend the whole week on our mental attitude, and we're going to look at what creates these categories, these past experiences that become categories that make us entrapped in our losing way. Again, at this point, you know all the conditions, you know all the grounded assessments, and it's all psychological. So let's think today about the most important thing, again, is how you handle new information. If you handle new information as it's coming in, you have no choice but to be in the present. It will keep you out of the future, and it will keep you out of the past. And this is where life is, in the eternal now. So have a good time right now. Keep having a good time. We'll be back with you tomorrow. And don't forget your morning pages. Hi, this is day 2 of our last week together, and today our goal is to look at the third force. Remember when we were talking about chaos and the science of chaos and strange attractors, and we said that there is a third force. For example, if you have a first attractor or a point attractor on a pendulum that goes back and forth, and then you hit that that pendulum with a third force, it takes off in chaotic behavior. And the attractors that explain human behavior are called strange attractors because they explain the strange behavior of human beings. Let's go over here to the board for a moment and let's look at these. The first thing is we'll talk about space 1, which is our reality here. This is our thinking. And in our thinking, we're always thinking and dreaming about something that we want to have. We want to This is the car I want to buy. This is the trade I want to make. This is what I really want from life. This is our goals. This is our dreams. And this is what we use our brain for. Then we decide that once this happens, we meet up with something that's called resistance. Another word for resistance for most of us is reality. So we meet up with reality here, which tells us that we can't have what we want most. This is our space 2. And this is horizontal. This is linear science. This is classical science. And what we want to do is take in the science of chaos, a non-linear dynamics. Whenever we think of something we want, it always goes with resistance. And what we're really talking about is the difference between power and force. Another way to say this, and we don't want to get too metaphysical here, but let's talk about what really is happening. This happens at the physical plane. And this is where things really happen. Now, this happens at the mental plane, or let's call this the super-physical plane. And then there's another plane up here, which we will call, and we're calling this for lack of imagination of anything better, and don't read anything into this. This is the metaphysical plane. So that's the underlying structure. This is the metaphysical plane, this is the superphysical or the thinking plane, and this is the physical where things happen. And what happens is that this is causative. So the things that happen are caused by the underlying structure. The categories, and we're going to talk about categories and how we form categories tomorrow, but categories are formed at optimal learning periods. And those then control our behavior because those become the underlying structure. Remember that the underlying structure of the market is, in our opinion, the Elliott wave. The underlying structure of the Elliott wave is the fractal. And here, This is the underlying structure of our thinking, and this is the underlying structure of also our accomplishment. So let's go over to the board, to the slide over here, and let's look at what we call the two-option limit. What we're looking at are things that keep us out of our zone. We want to get in the zone and play in the zone. And the two-option limit is win or lose. That's a trap. We think in those two options. We're either going to make money on this trade or we're going to lose money on this trade. What this does then, this creates first force thinking, which is wishing. And in wishing, let's introduce another concept, which is a willingness to win and a willingness to get in the zone. Because if we get in the zone, we're going to create risk. Remember, we're letting the new incoming information organize itself. Let me give you an example. Let's test your willingness. I'm going to make a deal with you, and that deal is I'm going to buy you a first-class ticket to Las Vegas, Nevada. I'm going to give you $10,000 in cash, and here's my goal. I want you to go out there and lose all of that $10,000 and then come back. Are you willing to do that? And just think of what your reaction to that is. Will you do that? That's the first force. That's the thinking. That's the wishing. Now, what that creates, because we're talking about force rather than power, and there's a big difference between power and force, is that creates its component or the other side of it. And these two things go together just like two sides of a coin. You cannot have one without the other. That creates the second force, which is feeling, our reality, and our Joe Gremlin. Now, we're introducing a guy that we haven't talked about before. His name is Joe Gremlin, and he comes from World War II. And a gremlin was whatever messed up something that should be working right. So if you have all the indicators and you think you're using all the indicators but not making money, then Joe Gremlin is whispering in your left ear. Now, let's change the willingness for just a moment. You were willing to go, I assume you were willing to go to Las Vegas and lose $10,000 of my money for me, and I appreciate that very much. Let's test something else. I'm going to buy you a first-class ticket, round trip to Las Vegas. I'm going to give you $10,000 in cash, and what I want to know from you is, are you willing to go out there and double my money by gambling? Now, what I'd like for you to do at this point is simply to examine your own thinking and your own feeling about those two opportunities. One opportunity is to go out there and lose my $10,000. The other opportunity is to go out there and double my money. Which do you feel more confident to do? Now, if, as I suspect, you feel like you're more certain that you could lose that money rather than double it, then you're in the trap. So what we need to do is, how do we tame this Joe Gremlin? Because Joe Gremlin is the guy who whispers in our ear, sits on our shoulder, and says, you can't do it, you can't do it, you can't do it. So we've got to take care of this guy. This is the fear of trading. So let's look at how we can tame old Wild Joe here. And Joe is our past categories. These are the teachers who said we couldn't do it. These are the parents who said, who the hell do you think you are? And we're still trying to find out who we are. And Joe is the guy. This is the guy that we either need to kill, and if we kill him, then we're dead ourselves, or we need to tame him. So we need to tame Joe. The best way to tame Wild Joe is to simply notice what he's doing. We notice our noticing. Now, most of us think that we probably are our thoughts. We aren't our thoughts. We're the people who are, or we're whatever is thinking our thoughts. We're not our thoughts itself. So what we want to do is simply notice our noticing. When I gave you the example a few minutes ago of going to Las Vegas and either doubling my money or losing $10,000, whatever way you felt, you need to notice that and then go under that and figure out why you feel that way. And then we'll talk about how you can change it. So simply noticing, just simply notice what you're thinking about as you're thinking about it. It's kind of backing up and taking a second look. The second thing to do, after you've noticed that you feel more comfortable in losing my money than doubling my money, then the second step is to simply choose and play. And notice that word, playing with options. And when you play with options, you're thinking about, what would I feel if I really felt like I could go out there and double the money? What would I feel if I really felt like I could buy the bonds and make $1,000 tomorrow on the bonds? We're playing and choosing with options. Nothing real serious, but then we come to the really serious part, and that is being in process. And when you're being in process, the only way you can be in process is to be here and now. And being in process allows us to create change and allows us to go to the third force. Now let's look at that third force again. Remember, we have the physical, the superphysical, and the metaphysical, which is things and thinking, and then the things that cause the thinking. So we have thinking, which is our first force, and remember, this is a two-edged sword. It's two sides of the same coin, because anytime you're thinking of something you want or something to do, there's also the resistance. I want to buy that new car, but geez, if I took that money and put it in the stock market, what would happen then down the road? What we need to do is to understand that knowing more and more and more about the market does not get us off of this plane, because you can have all the knowledge in the world and still not be a successful trader or speculator. What we have found in our experience in working with traders over 4 decades is that there is no relationship between the intelligence of the trader and the results of the trader. As a matter of fact, there's some evidence that there might be an inverse relationship, that the smartest traders in the world don't make the most money. In fact, it looks sometimes as if those people who are just so dumb that they do whatever the market says, those are the ones who really make the fortunes. So the more knowledge we have is still on a horizontal plane, and this is an important concept to get. You can have all the knowledge in the world, but you haven't gotten to the underlying structure. What we want to get to, and it's a structure like this, and the thinking and the resistance, the thinking and the feeling and the ambitions and the resistance are two sides of this triangle, but the third side, which is understanding, that's vertical. That's not knowing more and more of what's so, but it's understanding what's so. And remember that understanding is a camouflage word for control. So when you go into the market and you're having a hard time and you call your buddy and you say, geez, you know, I don't understand this market. What you're really saying is I don't control the market, and what you're saying behind that is simply I don't control myself. We're working from old categories. So if you have understanding of the situation, understanding of yourself, and understanding of the market, what that always produces is good feelings. So if your thinking and resistance are taken care of, then what comes up is good feelings about the market. Now, when good feelings come in, what happens is you get all kinds of notions about the market. This is the art of trading. You come to the market with good feelings. You set yourself up so that you cannot lose, and that means you cannot lose your perspective, and your perspective is the most important commodity you'll ever deal with. You can lose money, but you can't lose your good feelings. So let's look at this in another way. What this thinking and resistance produces are duality. And the duality is what you experience when I ask you to go to Las Vegas and either lose money or win money. The duality inhibits your performance. And let's go back to the triangle, and let's go back to this understanding. And the understanding allows you to get with reality, and you can create your own reality. Because, and this is one of the truest statements I think has ever been made about the market, and that is that each one of us at a very, very deep level decides exactly how much money we're going to let the market give us. So we want to get out of this duality down here between thinking and resistance and into reality. And one way to do it is to start at the top, to start with good feelings. Don't trade. Get out of the polar thinking. And let's look at polar thinking. What is polar thinking? Well, polar thinking is what we started off with. That's thinking about content. That's thinking about winning and losing. And content is always in the past or the future. In the past, it brings up guilt, anger, sadness over our losses. In the future, what it brings up is preparing for losses. It creates our doubt, it creates our fear, and it creates our anxiety. And that's polar thinking. That's the gremlin. That's what Joe Gremlin's job is to do, is to divide you so that you exist and live and have your being in the past or in the future. What we want to do is we want to get into the process. And if we get into the process, and the process is simply another word for art, it's the how, not the what. So what we're interested in is how we trade, not what we trade. It's in the present. It has the power of process. This is where the music is. For example, if you're playing a tune on a piano or a clarinet or whatever, and you play one note, you want to leave that note and you want to stay with the present note. You don't want to get messed up with a future note. So you stay with this one note here until you're through, and then you move to the next note. That's process. That's being in the here and now. Again, in taming our gremlin, which is what makes this, we don't want to make new rules. Instead, we want to simply notice, be at choice, play with options, and be in process. Now, to do that, let's